Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Just a quick update on the Tonga volcanic eruption. Last week we were talking about sulfur dioxide content in the stratosphere and how this particular eruption did not, at least based upon initial measurements, do that. I just want to bring you up to speed on some of the newest measurements. Now, this was on the 18th. We actually looked at this particular map just in another form, and that was basically the eruption plume right there. Now, this is from a polar orbiting satellite, so you can see there's gaps in the data. That's simply because of the swath width of the satellite measurements. Very narrow, but extremely high resolution. Usually it takes 2 to 3 days to fill in the whole planet here. But this was when we saw the trade winds carry that sulfur dioxide here over toward Australia. Now, from there, this is some of the newest data we've got. And what happened is that those same prevailing winds brought the sulfur dioxide around and came over here into the Indian Ocean. And this is what the plume looks like right now. Now, when you initially look at that, if you're thinking, well, that doesn't look like much, that's kind of the take-home point here. We're just going to continue with our overall narrative that, based upon satellite observations, the amount of sulfur dioxide put into the stratosphere by this volcano is not enough to produce any sort of long-range climate disruption. So we'll just keep watching it, but that's the latest evidence I've got. From here, I want to get some month-to-date statistics out. We're going to talk first about temperature. The month of January, of course, has been a major flip in the pattern compared to what we had in December. And we're continuing to talk here about the potential for a shift in February again, but I've got some interesting perspective on that February pattern. But generally speaking, very cold compared to average east of the Rocky Mountains, and really only a few places along the west coast and in the desert southwest that have seen above average temperatures in January. On the precipitation side, the larger ridge that's been over the west has really forced a major, a long pause in precipitation in California. Again, we've struggled to have any sort of a subtropical jet or even a big high over low pattern which can bring in moisture to California. The southern plains, including big chunk of Texas here, has been quite dry. And even pockets of the Midwest have shown up dry as well. This was an area that we had called for to see some relief in the longer-term drought. We're certainly seeing that. I look forward to getting this Thursday's drought monitor update, but this is one from last Thursday. And we're just taking a look here at the extent of drought across the country, about 71%. But like I always do, I want to show those change maps again, because the latest drought monitor, let's see if we can get to load here. I apologize. I'm in a hotel right now, and the internet's terrible here. But you can see improvement over in the Carolinas, but a few spots here of degradation. If we just let this go back a month, it's going to give us an idea how January's kind of played out so far. And again, we've continued to see this area expand, and that's going to be front of mind for me for a while. Now, just thinking about what's come over here to parts of the Carolinas, we've now seen kind of back-to-back in the last 2 weeks, big winter storms, including an ice storm here. In fact, I was just looking over the weekend at some of the satellite observations. You can see the snow cover that was there on Sunday. But that brings me back to a couple of my favorite maps, which are the season-to-date snowfall totals. And it's just amazing to look at this map and see the regions that have had incredibly heavy snow and the places that have really missed out. And if you look again, I kind of jokingly just call this the great snow hole of 2022, but parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio still have not gotten much. In fact, before I left this morning in Champaign, we had another dusting. I think that dusting, if we add it to our total so far, brings us almost to an inch. So we'll have to see about that. But looking right here in the plains, and if you come over here, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia have really gotten hit pretty hard. We'd like to compare this to average. I think this map is a bit more intuitive because what it shows you is the percent of normal up to this point in the season. And I'm very thankful that December delivered so much snowfall into the west, especially into California, as we went into a very dry January time period so far. So again, just take this map in. It's an important one, I think, to keep an eye on as we progress through the rest of this season. Now, one other thing I want to do with snow here is I want to just take a look at two different maps showing a snow water equivalent. And the main reason I'm doing this is to look at the western mountains and also the northern plains. So this is our snow water equivalent right now. In other words, you melt the snow down, how much liquid does it put into the soil? You can also see there's a big area here from southern Saskatchewan and Alberta all the way through this part of the plains that doesn't have snow on the ground right now. But if you compare, just do this with me, compare the west to where we were a year ago. So that's 2021 at this point. This is 2022. So you can see that snowpack is substantial compared to a year ago. And also notice we were still not covered in snow in parts of North Dakota a year ago. And this ended up being a major, they were down over 40 inches compared to average. It was a precursor to the drought that set up in 2021. So we're looking at a much better situation, especially for North Dakota, the parts of the Missouri River, the headwaters of it, and then certainly the headwaters of the Mississippi. So I'm going to keep a close eye on that as we progress forward. But this pattern we've had throughout the month of January has really featured a large ridge just off the west coast. And it's kind of moved. Sometimes it's been out here, sometimes it's been sitting right over the coast. And we've had some Santa Ana winds out of this. We've had flow that's come over the top and then just dove. And this is what's excited a lot of those systems along the coast. It's been the deeper trough that's in place here, and the fact that we're a bit blocked up over the Atlantic. Can you see the high that's in place here that is north of the low? So the flow tends to do something like that, and that really kept this pattern around for much of the month. Now, I've been asking this question for the last almost 10 days. Is the pattern going to shift in February? We got some early signals from the European long range. Then we saw last week some of the models picking up on a potential pattern shift. And what it was going to do was get rid of this ridge. But I'm going to tell you, we've got some pretty confusing pictures here coming from some of our major teleconnections like the MJO. It has collapsed back into what we call null space. That would be right here, which means we're not getting a strong signal anywhere, be it near Africa or over the Indian Ocean, north of Australia, or even out in the Western Pacific. That's the quadrants there. I have a suspicion now, after I've watched this all day today, that this might pop out into phase 5. And I think that's going to be very important, not only for North America, but also for South America. I'm going to do that video here in just a few moments. Now, at this point, I find myself trying to explain what the models are doing. And I'm doing that because backing out the meteorology on top of this, I'm just finding to be very challenging right now. Let me show you what I mean. We're looking in the tropics at those trade winds. And once again, now we haven't seen this in a long time, but here out, in the Western Pacific, we've all of a sudden got another 15-day time period where we're starting to see those strong trades again. See them? That's the blues. Now, if you notice where the trades meet these westerly winds, seems to be sitting somewhere in this vicinity. That means they're going to get rising motion here. We'll have to get rising motion here. And that's what makes me think that the MJO's actually got more of a signal of a phase 5. But I think the models, especially the long-range models, are not necessarily seeing that signal as strongly, and I think they're relying almost entirely on what we have with La Niña. So despite the stronger trade winds right here, we're not getting upwelling from that. The best upwelling is still over here on the eastern side, and we still have this cold water in the Gulf of Alaska. So I'm thinking about this, trying to understand the February forecast I'm about to share with you. And I think right now the models have just fully kind of sunk their teeth into these two factors, especially the La Niña right in through here. And this is what how I kind of want to make that case to you. If you reconstruct all of the ocean temperature pattern across the equatorial Pacific, going back to 1950, we can find all these big La Niña years, right? I went ahead and just grabbed them all those La Niña winters. What did they end up doing, in the following Februaries through March? It's no surprise that they tended to push the ridge back here. They tended to favor phase 7, phase 8 in the MJO, which puts a big ridge here. And there tended to be a trough over the Canadian Prairie, and the flow came around and then rose up. And there often was a ridge that either sat between here and here. It was not a setup to bring in any sense of a subtropical jet, so this was not a part of the flow pattern. And this delivered just a very active kind of mid-south, Midwest, Ohio Valley, Northeast storm track, something you've heard me say just a lot lately. I think about all of that, and I said, all right, let's just go take all those years. I just grabbed them all, and let's shrink that so you can see it. There you go. And said, make me a composite map of it. And again, without the subtropical jet, we see that California in the southwest is drier and Texas is drier. But the flow, coming over the ridge, which is way over here, and then diving like this and then ejecting here, keeps this area quite active. So I don't think there's any surprises there based upon what we just analyzed with the high pattern. So the long-range European just came out this afternoon, and this is what it shows for February 5th through March 5th. And what do you know? It's got drier in California, drier in Texas, even drier along the Gulf Coast. And we would go back and say that's consistent with the La Niña, which means I think this long-range outlook I'm providing you now is fully based on La Niña. And look, it's got this area over toward more active. Same with the Pacific Northwest. So that would be when the jet stream does something like that. On the temperature side of it, if you end up taking deeper troughs over the Canadian Prairie, we're going to have to let that cold air out at times. But there'll be some sense of ridging that'll either be built between here, and at times up the East Coast, which means the storm track's going to run just north of that. And we got the colder conditions in the west simply because that's where we have the great snowpack, and the troughs are just in that area and just to the north of it. So I find myself explaining the models with the model data. It's kind of a circular argument, but I think that most of this is predicated on the long ranges just seeing if we have a La Nina and it's February and into March, this is just what we tend to get. Now, in the near term, there's a bit of perplexing changes we saw in the models just here in the last 6 hours. And I want to talk to you about what that's going to do to our near-term forecast. What we've got right now is we've got winter weather advisories that are out for parts of Colorado, getting into Kansas. We might even get some snow down here in the panhandles. That'd be fantastic. Wind chill advisories are in place on Monday night here, and there's a few places, especially down one of our Great Lakes, that we've got some lake effect snow conditions that are giving us the winter weather advisories. In the west, fog, stagnant air. There's been some really incredible fogs throughout the west as of late, and I would love to show you them on satellite, but my internet connection's so poor I can't even do it. But I'd like to show you where this is all going, because most of this next week is going to continue to favor a ridge in the west, hence drier conditions. We're going to watch high pressure cells kind of slide from here down to here. So what they end up doing is they end up pushing the flow up against the mountains, and so we got a little bit in here of better snow. The clippers are kept pretty far to the north. In the storm track, we got one system that's going to come out here, and then I'm going to talk about what it might possibly do to the east coast in a little bit. But this is your next 7 days in terms of precipitation anomalies. Now, both the European and the GFS are kind of back to the same skill score right now. So let's go ahead and compare both models and see how things shake down here. So this was midday today on Monday. Let's go ahead and play this forward a little bit and just see that snow that came through Chicago. And by the way, this is why I'm so late getting in this video to you tonight. This made my flight so late today in Chicago. But that snow has moved here a little bit farther to the east where we have the winter weather advisories. What you're going to see is two other things that happen besides that. In both models, there's a coastal low. It's going to spread some rain along the Gulf Coast. Good, there's some drier areas there. And then here's the high, okay? Both in both models. And you can see that right here, Colorado coming into parts, maybe Nebraska, Kansas, both models are trying to put down some locally heavier amounts of snow. We'll take a look at the snow totals in a moment. But as we play forward, that first wave, this high pressure cell is just too dominant to allow it to curl up the coast. So that's the first one that gets pushed out. Now what we get after that, little short wave tries to go into the Hudson Bay. It's in both models, drags a front through. You can see some snow coming in on that. So it's going to come out of the prairie and here into the Great Lakes states. And that's Thursday. We're now playing into Thursday midday, Thursday evening. Let's just go ahead and get this to Friday morning. Now what you notice is that in both models, we're bringing that light snow in through this area, all right? And the tail end of that front is going to stay somewhere down in this vicinity in both models. Now this is 6 a.m. Friday morning. As we play forward, you can see that the GFS, back to its typical self, was quite aggressive on developing that system quickly and already returning and forcing it to run right up along the Gulf Coast here. And therefore you got the flow on the backside, bringing in the snow. There's another Arctic high behind this. The GFS is a bit similar, the European is, but it's a bit farther offshore. Do you notice that? And then both models carry this right up the East Coast. Now, there is a possibility, if you look at the operational runs, that we're talking about a potentially very heavy snowfall event from most of the Mid-Atlantic, even back to the Carolinas, all along the coast and into this interior section of New England. By the way, all along the way, lake effect snow this week, okay? But I'll just make a point here that we're pretty far out in this forecast, and so much can change, as you all know, because the shortwave that's producing this is still way out in the open Pacific, and it has to link up with the load that's going over the Hudson Bay in the first place. What is important to see after this as we go into Sunday and Monday is that notice what's happening in the Pacific Northwest. And we have not had this kind of action there for a while. What is it? It's another trough that's digging into the Northwest. And this was the potential pattern change that I thought I was seeing for the end of January and start of February. But those are our main systems that are happening this week. And let's go talk about them by first discussing where that coastal low might possibly be by Friday night. So first of all, in the European, there's still considerable spread in the position of the low. Each L represents where one of the ensemble members is putting the low. It will depend on especially the extent of this high pressure that's on the backside. And what we want to watch for with this high pressure, okay, is just got to remember how this is going to work. We need this high pressure cell to be a little bit more delayed. Keep it a little bit farther to the west. That will allow the trough to pull this low closer to the shore and then really hit the northeast hard with some heavy snow. Well, I don't know if we need that, but that's what I'll be watching for. There's still a lot of time for this to move. Now, thinking about snow here, I just want to bring up a map, and this is really quite telling on this pattern of what it's doing. Over the next 7 days, this is showing you the probability of getting 3 inches of snow. So the European ensemble is attempting to bring that heaviest snow band right in through here. See it? So it's keeping the low out farther offshore. This is the event we talked about here right away at the beginning of the week, and you can see our lake effect snow. But what you don't see is any major winter storms curling up anywhere in the Midwest. Certainly in the West, we're not getting anything either. And that's just because this pattern most of this week is dominated by something that looks like that in the jet stream. And as we always discuss, that's a lot of convergent flow. That's why you have high pressure in this place. Precip side of this, you already saw the anomalies, but let's add it up so we can get an idea on that Gulf Coast system, because we're dry here. So to be able to bring in maybe a ½ inch to upwards of an inch, inch and a quarter is pretty good. A lot of this was light snow today, and here's the snow we're talking about coming in, in the next 2 days. All right, what's happening after that? Well, the European cranks up that low up the coast, but keeps most of the precip offshore, except for the snow that's expected to fall right in through here. You notice California through Washington, dry until Sunday. But watch this. Now, this is an operational run. We're just looking at for patterns. Watch what happens as we begin February. You see the shifts here? Bringing a system in the northwest, troughs possibly ejecting here, and delivering what could be a sizable system. And that's what I got to call into question. And what I'm calling into question is this. This is the 12Z ECMWF ensemble forecast for the 3rd of February. And all weekend long, this trough you see here stayed there. And the ridge was out like this, the trough dove in, and then it slowly came out over a bigger ridge that was here. And I even put it in some morning video content I did early this morning for some groups. And by the noon runs that came in today, well, this is the new position. Now, this is still active for this area, but it's not as far west as we thought. Let me show you this next map. This map shows the change between the 0Z run and 12Z. I just showed you the 12Z. So compared to the morning runs, there's now much higher heights here and lower heights there. And that is a significant shift at day 10 in this overall pattern. And the new week 2 precipitation continues to be drier for California. But it's got this area going over quite active. And this is going to start the moment you see the troughs digging into the west, which will begin late this weekend. So I'm telling you, there's a lot of uncertainty in this forecast right now, even as far out as days 7, 8, 9, and 10. And therefore, looking at the longer range, that's why I told you the models seem to be hung up on what's going on with La Niña for the forecast for February into early March. But I think we need to watch the MJO to possibly pop out into phase 5. That could be a really important indicator. From there, let's talk temperatures. We already saw these temperatures today on Monday. We had actually frost and freeze warnings down here in parts of Florida. But as we go into Tuesday, okay, there's a big shot of Arctic air. We've talked about that. There's Wednesday getting into Thursday. As we work our way into the weekend, this is Friday's temperatures compared to normal, Saturday and Sunday. So you can see this mild air trying to come into this area. A lot of colder air stays entrenched in the east. Now take a look at this. This is the day 5 through 10 forecast from the ECMWF 12Z run. All right. This is the new day 10 through 15. To show you the impact of changing around and putting this ridge in here, again, this is the new day 10 through 15. This was the one I had this morning. That's how big of a pattern flip we just saw in the models. So I'm going to tell you predictability is low out there once you get past day 7, 8, or 9. I don't think the models are able to handle what's happening in the North Pacific. The signals from the tropics are a bit weak right now. MJO's collapsed. We're watching the momentum that just fell off in a big way across the North Pacific. And I think what we're seeing here is the models struggling to pick up on the right signal. So we've lost some of that. What I do know is that the polar vortex is quite strong right now. And while it may eventually migrate around and line up somewhere here over maybe the Chukchi Sea or Alaska, its connection, in other words, is it disrupted enough to cause a surface problem? I don't think so. Because the longer range forecast here of the next couple of weeks continues to keep the strength quite high. Just a reminder, a year ago right now, we were preparing that forecast for the Arctic outbreak that got all the way to the Gulf Coast that happened from the 5th of February through the almost the 18th and 19th. So that was what happened when the polar vortex was disrupted like that a year ago. So we certainly don't see that. I'll watch all of it. I'll keep an eye on it this week and report back to you on Thursday what we see as in terms of updates. I'll talk to you then. Thank you.